The sun hung low over savannah, casting long golden shadows across the dry grass. Daniel Hayes adjusted the strap on his camera bag, beads of sweat collecting under his khaki collar. He was used to the heat, the silence, and the wild. It was his second year documenting wildlife in one of Africa's most remote reserves. But something about this evening felt off. The air was too still. Birds that usually chattered endlessly were quiet. Even the usual rustle of unseen creatures moving through the grass had stopped. Then he heard it, a deep guttural sound. A growl maybe, not aggressive, not warning. Pain. Daniel froze, scanning the horizon. Another growl, louder this time. Desperate. Gripping his camera in one hand and his utility knife in the other, he moved slowly toward the sound. Each step brought the noise into sharper focus. It wasn't just a growl, it was breathing, ragged and strained. And then he saw her. A lioness, beautiful but battered, lay half hidden in a dry ravine. Her golden fur was streaked with dust and blood. Her paw was caught in a thick, cruel wire, a poacher's snare buried beneath the underbrush. For a moment, their eyes met. Hers were wide, glassy with pain, but fierce. There was no mistaking the warning in her gaze. Don't come closer. But Daniel didn't back away. He crouched slowly, his heart thudding like a drum in his chest. He knew what this meant. One wrong move, one sudden sound, and she could lunge, trap or no trap. Easy, he whispered, though his voice shook. I'm not here to hurt you. The lioness growled low, a trembling sound more from exhaustion than anger. Daniel circled slowly, keeping low. The snare had tightened around her paw, cutting into the flesh. It must have been there for hours, maybe longer. She had tried to fight it, judging by the torn earth around her. Kneeling just out of reach, Daniel pulled a length of rope from his pack, fashioning a makeshift loop on a stick to keep her head at bay, not to hurt, just to protect himself if she lunged. Then, inch by inch, he leaned toward the snare. Her growls grew louder. His hands trembled, but he pressed on, his knife sawing carefully through the wire. Time slowed. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears. And then a snap. The wire came loose. The lioness jerked away, staggering upright. She limped a few feet before turning back toward him. For a long moment, she stared at him, her chest heaving. The air between them crackled with something ancient. Fear, awe, maybe even understanding. Then she disappeared into the tall grass, without a sound. Daniel sank to his knees, breathless, shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. He thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. The following days passed in a haze for Daniel. He couldn't stop replaying the moment. The snare tightening, the lioness's raw strength, and above all, the way she had looked at him before vanishing into the grass. Back at camp, he documented everything in his journal, pairing his notes with blurred, trembling shots from his camera. They weren't award-winning photos, but they were honest, the kind that carried weight in the eyes of people who'd never set foot on wild soil. He submitted the incident to the park rangers, who logged the snare's coordinates and praised his bravery, though not without stern reminders. You were lucky, Daniel. Don't do that again. He nodded, but deep down he knew he would. You don't walk away from a suffering animal. Not if you can help it. By the fourth day, life had returned to normal, or so it seemed. The wind swept lazily across the plains. Elephants ambled across the horizon. Wildebeest kicked up clouds of dust, and Daniel moved quietly among them, camera in hand, his boots leaving faint prints in the sand. But there were signs, small things that nagged at him. The zebras were more skittish than usual, a group of antelope scattered without cause. And one night, just before sleep, he heard a distant roar, not the thundering kind that spoke of dominance, but a lower, rumbling call, almost mournful. He wrote it off as coincidence. The bush had its moods like the sea, unpredictable but ancient. Then, on the sixth day, something changed. It was just after sunrise. The sky was painted in soft pastels, and Daniel was crouched near a watering hole, hoping to catch a shot of a rare sable antelope. He never saw the lioness approach. It was only when the antelope froze, then bolted, that he turned and saw her. She was thinner, her gait uneven, but her eyes were unmistakable. The same lioness, The same silent stare. Daniel didn't move. His breath caught in his throat. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, dragging its tiny paws through the grass, was a cub, no more than a few weeks old. Daniel's heart lifted. She had survived. She had a cub, but then the light shifted and he saw the truth. The cub wasn't moving. Its tiny frame was limp, carried gently in its mother's jaws, lifeless. The lioness walked slowly, limping still. She came within 30 feet of him, then stopped. Her eyes locked onto his once more. She lowered the cub, and then she stepped back. The silence was unbearable. No growls, no roars, just the wind and the soft thud of Daniel's own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He stepped forward, cautiously. The lioness didn't move. She let him come close enough to see the cub, its small body untouched, perfect, as if it had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. Daniel dropped to his knees. Tears welled in his eyes. She had brought her cub to him. Why? For help? For comfort? For burial? He would never know. But as he reached down to gently lift the tiny form, the lioness turned and walked away, not running, not hiding, just moving forward. And Daniel sat there, under the rising sun, holding the fragile weight of a life lost and the unspoken trust of a creature most believing capable of such depth. He would bury the cub beneath the acacia tree near his camp. He would take no photos, say no words. Some things were too sacred for cameras. He thought he had saved a life. But somehow, in this quiet exchange of grief, she had given him something far greater. Daniel didn't speak for hours after burying the cub. He sat beneath the acacia tree, the grave a small mound before him, marked by a circle of stones. The sun was high now, but he didn't notice the heat. His mind was elsewhere, trying to make sense of what had happened. He had lived among wild things for years, observed them through lenses and data, reported on migration and predation and survival. But nothing in any field guide or biology textbook had prepared him for this. She had brought the cub to him, not to eat, not to protect, but to share, as if she remembered his act of compassion and came to return something. Her grief, her story, her trust. 6 months later, the grass had turned green again. The rains had come early, painting the savannah in a fresh coat of life. Herds returned. Birds danced across open skies. And Daniel, older now in a way the mirror couldn't quite show, returned to where it all began. He didn't tell anyone he was going back. No camera crew, no journalists, just him, his journal, and the silence that only the wild knows how to keep. He walked the same trail through the tall grass, boots kicking up earth, past the place where he had once crouched in fear and compassion beside a wounded lioness. He found the tree. The acacia still stood, its branches gently swaying, the circle of stones still undisturbed beneath it. He knelt there, touching one of the rocks, not out of ritual, but remembrance. He stayed a while, letting the breeze tell stories through the leaves. Then he turned to leave. But he wasn't alone. A shape moved on the ridge, golden, sleek, steady. It was her, the lioness. Time had healed her wounds. Her stride was stronger, her coat richer. But it was her eyes Daniel recognized first. Still watchful, still fierce, still knowing. And beside her, not one but 2 cubs. They were playful, bounding ahead of her before stopping abruptly when they noticed him. She gave a low chuff, and they settled, alert but calm. Daniel stood motionless. The lioness came forward a few paces. The space between them was smaller now, not filled with fear, but with something else. Something wordless. She didn't come to him this time. She didn't need to. She simply looked, eyes meeting his, and then, slowly, turned to lead her cubs away into the waving grass. No dramatic roars. No lingering glances. Just peace. Daniel didn't follow. He let them go. And as they vanished into the wild, he realized this was a real ending. Not the story the world saw. Not the one that made headlines, but this quiet confirmation that trust once given could echo through generations. That mercy mattered. That memory lasted. And that somewhere in the vast and untamed world, a lioness remembered the man who would save her and chose, in her own way, to say goodbye.